Okay, welcome everyone to Fruits of the Orchard, Parshat Balak. For those who have Fruits of the Orchard, we are going to be learning a combination of two Torahs beginning on page 429, called A Moment in Time, and in its time, I will hasten it. Parshat Balak is about the king Balak, who is terrified. He sees Israel coming, about to enter into the land, and he hires the heathen prophet, the sorcerer, the magician Bilam, to curse the Jews. And Bilam wants to curse the Jews, but God turns everything that he wants to do into blessings. And the whole parsha is about what happens and all of the different blessings that he ends up giving in the form of parables. And even he prophesies. He was a very enigmatic, mysterious person that someone will call him a lowlife. He was considered really a lowlife, but he had prophetic powers. And we're not going to delve into that, but those who have Orchard of Delights and Fruits of the Orchard. So in Parshat Balak, I deal with how we can understand that someone almost demented like Bilam could have such a powerful prophetic vision. And he gives over some visions of the Messianic era that are true to Jewish tradition and are quoted frequently. So the Gemara asks, how did Bilam have the power to curse? Where did his power come from? And they answer that he knew the moment of God's anger every day, and he could connect that moment in time, and he could curse people, and it would come true. So the Talmud asks, well, first of all, how do we know that God gets angry every day? And so there is actually a verse in Psalms, in the 7th Psalm, that says God is angered every day. But we have a paradox here, because we have another verse that says that God's chesed is all the day, continual, nonstop, all the day. So how does this work? So a third verse is brought to explain God's anger and God's chesed. They seem mutually exclusive. And so the other verse is Zeh l'umat zeh asa Elokim. This against this opposite this has God made. And this is one of the most important statements in the Torah, because this explains the whole idea of a measure for measure, mida keneged mida, a whole scientific idea of for every action, there's an equal and opposite action, a psychological understanding that every person has a yetzer hatov and a yetzer hara, has a good inclination and what we'll call a negative or an evil inclination. Everything is finely balanced, ultimately to give us free choice, so that we can choose between zeh l'umat zeh. Everything is balanced. Like we have this symbol of the month of Rosh Hashanah, Tishrei, are the scales. Everything is balanced in the universe. So there is the anger of God is what we'll call the midah of judgment, the aspect of judgment in the world. And of course, chesed is God's loving kindness. God created the world through loving kindness. But it's all balanced, just like the laws of nature. There's a whole field of science that deals with how finely and precise the laws of nature are that allows life to exist on this planet. And there are hundreds of examples that if even the slightest change in molecules, the atomic structure, in electrons, in all of these relationships, how far we are from different planets, the sun, the moon, the access, if anything would change, even the most slightest way, life on this planet would be impossible. And this is a whole field of science that looks into this. So the sages then ask, well, if Bilam could connect to this moment of anger, how long is that moment? And there's a discussion, and it ranges anywhere from a quarter of a second to a 15th of a second. That's how much of what we'll call God's anger there is in the world every day. But again, we understand this metaphorically. It's to keep the balance in the universe. But Bilam would find that moment of judgment, and he would curse people, and it would come true. So then the sages tell us, though, that the whole time that Bilam was trying to curse the Jews, there was no anger in the world. Bilam couldn't connect. And therefore he told Balak, he said, I can't curse them because I can't connect to this metaphysical energy of judgment or like dark matter in the universe to be able to curse the Jews. So here I want to delve a little bit into nature of time. And you'll see, it will take me a few minutes, but we'll see why it's important to understand time altogether. I'm just looking quickly at Dara's chat. I can't do this all the time, but she's right that there is what's called righteous indignation. When we understand God's anger, it's not what we call anger. We have to be very clear about that. But there is a positive aspect to anger, and that is when we see injustice, if there's no reaction on our part, then we can't empathize. So sometimes when we see injustice, we get upset. It angers us that there's such injustice, and then we're moved to do something about it. So again, anytime we talk about any human understanding of characteristics or attributes, and we associate them with God, it becomes somewhat problematic because we don't understand any of God's attributes as we understand our human attributes. There is some connection, of course, but we can't make a clear connection like that. Okay, so in Sefer Yetzirah, it tells us that there's three different levels of existence, of dimensions: Olam, Shana, and Nefesh. World, year, and soul. World means space, year means time, Nefesh means soul or consciousness. So here we see that in the middle is time. Time is the bridge that connects space and soul. And I heard from Rav Ginsburg explain it, that time is the pnimiut of space, is the inside aspect of space. Why? Without time, space would be frozen. We have the expression frozen in time. Well, space would be frozen because there would be no movement. Time allows everything to move. And so in modern science, and we're not going to delve into this right now, but you take mass and energy and light and velocity, and you put them all together, you get E equals mc squared. You get probably the most famous formula in science of who knows, maybe all of history, E equals mc squared. But time is one of the key elements because it's connected to the speed of light. And the speed of light is crucial to E equals mc squared. And matter, mass, and energy are interlocked, and all the movement is happening through time. So one of the ways of understanding how time works, and I heard this from Rav Ginsburg, and it's a very powerful idea. He compared time to motion pictures. If everyone remembers that in the beginning of motion pictures, there were celluloid film on rolls that were individual segments with black celluloid around it, and the motion picture would spin it quickly, and from our perception, everything was smooth and like happening like reality. But if you've ever seen when one of these reels like breaks down and it stops moving at a fast speed, you actually see the frames, the individual frames. And if you remember, the original cartoons were like, they made whatever, Bugs Bunny, a 1 minute cartoon. It took hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of drawings of first Bugs Bunny's hand was here, and the next frame it's here, and the next frame it's here, and the next frame it's here. But when you run it quickly, it's just like that. So Rav Ginsburg explained that's how time works. Every frame is a moment in time. We experience time as a smooth flow. But he said that's not how time works. Time works in a constant, what's called run and return from nothingness to somethingness. In other words, every split second, the world returns to nothingness. And the split second later, it is recreated in a new frame. But again, we experience it as a smooth flow. But time is passing through what's called run and return. And we know from science that light is packets of photons that are individual packets of energy that are like the frames of time, because light and time are intrinsically linked together. And so that's why every day we say, that God renews the acts of creation every day. But we learn in Kabbalah that it's not every day. It's every split second, God is recreating the world, what's called yesh mi'ayin, something from nothing. And each time that that happens is a moment of time. It's a frame of time. And then in between is the black celluloid of the nothingness, that the world returns to nothingness, and then it is recreated. Now, this sounds like a fantastic kind of imaginative idea, but we now know in science that in every atom, there are pulsations of particles that come into existence for a billionth of a second and then disappear. They go out of existence. Every point of space in the entire universe has a constant flow. And when we talk about a billionth of a second, they can actually measure that now. That's pretty astounding. Here they were talking about Bilam found in a quarter of a second, the moment of God's anger. But science now can measure up to a billionth of a second, and they can witness these energy packets coming into existence and out of existence. And all of creation is fueled, is animated by this constant flow of God's energy into the universe. So now, taking all of this, we'll go back to Bilam finding his moment in time. So, and again, this is a metaphor. Bilam is connecting to the blackness, to the nothingness, because this is the vacuum that we learned from the Arizal, that when God contracted his infinite being, there was a vacuum, an empty space, and then a ray of light enters in, and from that all creation comes. But here we're understanding it's happening every billionth of a second, over and over and over again. So Bilam, he was connecting to this vacuum. And we're told that in the vacuum, this is the source of where evil can come from. Doesn't mean it's coming from it, but the possibility of evil is in that nothingness. But for the Jewish people, the idea of ayin is the womb of everything. And that's why Bilam could not curse the Jews. Everyone else, he could enter in to this split second of nothingness, and he would fill it with curse. But for the Jewish people, yesh me'ayin, the ayin is the Ein Sof, is the infinite one. And it's the womb from which all existence comes from. The great paradox of existence, of time. And so now we can understand that Bilam is connecting to the same place we're connecting to. But he, Zeh Le'umat Zeh Asa Elokim. He's interpreting it. He's drawing from it evil. And we're drawing from it light. We're drawing from it tikkun, rectification, love, healing. And so this is the Zeh Le'umat Zeh. Now, with the few minutes we have left, there is an expression in Isaiah, Yeshayahu, talking about a future redeemer. And he says, in God's name, Be'ita achashena. In its time, I will hasten it, meaning the redemption. The redemption will come in its time. I will hasten it. So the sages ask, well, that's paradoxical. If it's in its time, how can it be hastened? And if it can be hastened, why are you telling me it has a set time? So they answer this rhetorical question by saying that if Israel merits, it can be hastened. If we don't merit, the redemption will come in its time, but we could bring it sooner, but we have to merit it. So here we have like two opposites again. Is it in its time or can it be hastened? Okay, so we just offered one solution to it, but I want to offer another idea that they're both happening at the same time. In its time and I will hasten it can be talking about the same time. So what am I referring to? And this is connected to a statement in pretty much a prophetic statement in the Zohar based on the fact that Noah was 600 years old at the time of the flood. And he's told that, in the 600th year, the well springs of water from above, the 40 days and nights of rain, flooded the world. But if you look in the text, it says also that the well springs of water from below flooded the world at the same time. There's like a double flood from above and from below. And the Zohar says that based on the idea that Noah was 600 years old, says that in the 600th year of the 6th millennium, the well springs of waters from below, which is interpreted to mean the waters of secular science and technology, will flood the world. And at the same time, the well springs of waters from above, meaning spirituality and mysticism, will come from above. So the 600th year in the 6th millennium is 5600, which was 1840. But 1840 is the end period, is the 600th year. Well, the whole century before is from 1740 to 1840. So what happened in those years? 1740 approximately began, which is called the Industrial Revolution, which changed human lifestyle forever. The beginning of the steam engine, the beginning of railroads, the beginning of Morse code, all these, the steam engine, which was used also in agriculture, everything started to change. And then you get electricity, and you get air travel, and you get computers, and you get AI, and it all is speeding up. Everything is progressing at a faster and faster speed. What happened around 1740 from the waters from above? The Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov revealed himself in 1734. In 1734, the Baal Shem revealed himself and began the Hasidic movement, which brought the teachings of Kabbalah into the open for the first time. So the reason I'm saying all of this is, with all of this technology, with all of these advances, if you just think about it, there was a time when to heat one's house, one had to go out and chop the wood and bring it into the house and build the fire, and it could take hours. To get clean water, sometimes people had to travel for hours to get a bucket of water. if someone needed a doctor, sometimes they could travel for days to get a doctor. Someone sent a letter, it could take months to get there. Look at our lifestyle now. Everything seems to be almost instantaneously. So one would think that with all of this time-saving technology, life would be so mellow now. We'd have so much time on our hands. We would have so much relaxation. Now, I mean, robots are replacing people in all the factories. Like everyone would just be free. But we know life seems more stressful. We can't get half the things done that we want to get done. The pace of life has turned out to be just the opposite. So here we see an interesting thing, that I'm going back to the 600th year of the 6th millennium, because according to our tradition, this cycle of history will last for 6,000 years. And then will come the Messianic era. And that's the understanding that there's a set time, but it can be hastened. In other words, in theory, Mashiach could have come 100 years ago, or 500 years ago, or 2,000 years ago. It could have been hastened. Obviously, it wasn't. But as we get closer and closer to the 6,000th year, we can see what's happening in Israel. Why are we back in Israel now? Why didn't we come back 200 years ago, 400 years ago, 600 years ago? Because we're approaching the set time for redemption. And therefore, all of history is moving in a certain direction. And now we have the state of Israel. We have almost the majority of Jews in the world are back in Israel. They say within a decade, for the first time in 2,500 years, a majority of Jews in the world will be back in Israel. And this will be a watershed spiritually. And so, just to put this together, we are speeding towards redemption. All of the technological advancements are connected to Mashiach. And that's what the Zohar said. I didn't mention it before. When it said that in the 600th year of the 6th millennium, the waters from below will flood the world. And we've seen that, see it clearly. And the waters from above will flood the world. You can walk into any Jewish bookstore now and get almost any text translated into many different languages. You can go online and you can, not even on your hand device, you have like everything that's ever been written in Judaism in the palm of your hand. Like we can't even conceive. And without getting into it, what's about to happen with AI, we have no concept. We have no concept what's about to hit us. And we have to pray it's for the good, because there's a lot of possible dangers there. There's no idea, and I think the world is waking up to that we're speeding towards this future. So if we put it together, the Zohar says that when the flood waters flood the world, they end by saying, all in preparation for the Messianic era. That's what the Zohar says. So all of this is happening as we're speeding towards the Messianic era. And that's how we can understand Be'ita Achashena. In its time, it will be quickened. In other words, time is not changed, but our perception of time has changed. And so therefore, we are speeding towards redemption. It's not that time has changed, but our history is moving towards it, just like we know scientifically now that the galaxies are speeding away from each other in increasing speeds. There is actually a scientific reality to Achishena. Everything is speeding up, and history is speeding up, but ultimately it will happen in its time. And this is the moment of time that only God knows. Only God knows the moment of time. We could try to hasten it. And so we'll end with a blessing that, first of all, we shouldn't live such stressful lives. That would be the greatest blessing in the world, is that somehow all of this technology, which can help, that helps us so much to live an incredible lifestyle compared to hundreds of years ago. Here you just jump on a plane in wherever in the world and you're in Israel in 10 hours, less. It used to be, who could even conceive of coming to Israel? Here, you don't have to send a letter that takes months. You just send an email, you send a WhatsApp, you send a Twitter, you send an Instagram, you send a WhatsApp. Like, we can't even keep up with how many platforms there are. The telephone, like, it's all instantaneous now. And yet, we're more stressed than ever. So the biggest blessing is somehow we can figure out how to use all of this in the most positive way. But it is all in preparation for the Messianic era. And we should see it, and it should all be for the good.